Drop it. Power panel. Cenk, Uygur, John Iadarola, Michael Shure with you guys. It's an old school power panel with a new twist. Michael's running for Congress. He's one of 2 congressional candidates on the show today. In the second hour, we're gonna have Amy Vilela running in to represent a city where I would love to tell you what happens, but I can't. Whatever happens there stays there. So if you had LA and she had Vegas, that would be a hell of a thing.
That would be great.
So, all right, ShureForCongress.com. I'm not saying anything except for the words that I've just spoken. Okay, speaking of words mattering, that's going to relate to the first story that John's got, and then a shocking turn of events. I don't want you to go anywhere without realizing, and it's going to be relatively soon in this hour. There's a Democrat who actually stood up for us.
Is it Michael?
Okay, I mean, other than Michael, he's a candidate. He's a candidate, not there yet. But it actually, that guy is related to Michael in a sense, not related in terms of family, but you'll see. You'll see all of that as we proceed forward.
Don't worry, you haven't spoiled it because I don't even know what you're talking about at this point. I'm like, wait, what the hell? Anyway,
before we get into this, for the 20-year thing is unbelievable. We've been on the air this long. More unbelievable to me is that you find a different way every Friday to drop it. I can't get over it. Each time I'm wondering which one is he gonna, but it's always a new one. I mean, it's nuanced, but it's amazing.
Someone's got to string those together.
Now that is a compliment I have never received before, and I deeply appreciate it.
I knew you would.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, the commentary of Friday, super repetitive and predictable, but the dropping, different every time. Anyway.
All right.
There, I just dropped it, and it's the mic.
So,
anyway.
What are you, my 11-year-old son with the sick burns?
Is he burning you already?
Oh, are you kidding me?
I want to see it.
It's a fire clinic in there.
Okay.
All right.
Well, with that, let's get serious, everyone. We've got some scary info for you. We're gradually learning more and more about what happened, not only on January 6th, but in the immediate run up to it. Here is a fun little tidbit. A day before the actual riot, the chief of staff for Mike Pence, former vice president, apparently had a warning for the head of Mike Pence's Secret Service. They already predicted at that point that Donald Trump might turn on him and that might be a big deal. The chief of staff at that point was Mark Short, had a message for the agent, Tim Geibels, who said to him the president was going to turn publicly against the vice president and that could present a security risk to Mike Pence. Short didn't know what form the security risk might take. I don't think anybody predicted exactly what would happen that next day. But after days of intensifying pressure from Trump on Pence to take the extraordinary step of intervening in the certification of the Electoral College count to forestall Trump's defeat, Short seemed to have good reason for concern. And of course, if you've been watching this for us for a while or paying attention to American politics, you know what ended up happening. That warning turned out to be a good thing to have done because the situation turned incredibly chaotic, and we want to show you a little bit of how things went down. So yeah, they thought that Trump might turn on him. He did, that it might present a security risk. It was, they had to get the vice president out of there. And I know that we already knew that had happened. I don't know how much scarier the warning is, but the entire thing is just so, it's incomprehensible that we got to this point.
Yeah, but it's even more incomprehensible that we haven't gotten out of that point yet. So let's just break this down real quick. Look, guys, we know that they were trying to murder Mike Pence. How do we know? Well, you just heard it with your own ears. They were chanting, "Hang Mike Pence," as in murder the vice president of the United States, as they broke into the Capitol trying to find him. And by the way, we also know that they were within 1 to 2 minutes of catching up with him. They had gone in the same direction that he was in, and Secret Service barely got him out of there. Maybe, by the way, Secret Service barely got him out of there because they got the warning from his own office a day ago. Hey, be careful. Our own president might try to get his vice president murdered in America. And Donald Trump, if the election were held today, would win the presidency. What is going on, America? What's wrong with you? I mean, this is plain as day. Even his own vice president, the day before, His chief of staff tells the Secret Service, remember, the president's a maniac and might try to physically harm his own vice president. And everybody takes it as, oh, that's totally normal. It's not totally normal. That's insane. Could you imagine if Biden's office, chief of staff, talked to the Secret Service back in 2016 and said, oh, by the way, we're leaving office. Now remember, Barack Obama might try to murder me. So can you please protect me against Barack Obama? That would have been the biggest story in American history, literally of my lifetime, political story of my lifetime. Trump does it, everyone's like, oh yeah, everybody knows Trump's a murderer and encourages his own vice president to be killed. That's normal. It's not normal. The guy's a goddamn lunatic. So I'm asking the Republicans, which is, I know it's absolutely impossible, for God's sake, snap out of it, or is this who you are? Do you like that Trump did that and that they almost killed Pence? Do you like that? Because by supporting Trump, you're saying, yeah, I kind of love that.
I think some like that.
Well, yeah, they must like it. I mean, they nominated him and then they nominated him after they knew as much as they did about him. Even not this. You didn't have to know this to know the guy was absolutely nuts. You knew it in 2015 too. But this goes to exactly what the problem in the Republican Party is this addiction to power, and the only person they see as being able to hold or wield power is that lunatic. And going to the nuts and bolts of this, and we used to talk about how spineless and soulless Mike Pence was, and how he should have stood up to Donald Trump, and he was weak and he was afraid. He might be the bravest vice president ever for knowing what was about to happen, what could happen, and still walking over to the Capitol to preside over that. And I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek on that, but if you think about it in those terms, it's not really terribly tongue-in-cheek.
No, but it's not though, because so look, I can't stand Mike Pence politically, and I don't think it's that big a deal. It's the lowest bar ever to go and do a ceremonial role. It's as I've said this analogy before. Trump was basically asking the guy who's throwing out the opening pitch in a baseball game to win the game.
Yeah,
but he's not in the game. It's a ceremonial opening pitch, right? And he's like, I don't care. Just pretend that was the game and steal the game for me, right? And Pence was like, no, I'm not gonna destroy American democracy. But you have to give credit where credit is due. He knew that he might be in very serious physical danger because he knows his own president was a lunatic. Now I'll take credit away from Mike Pence. So he's tweaked Trump since then, just once or twice. Why don't you come out and say, hey, I knew ahead of time this lunatic was gonna try to get me killed. Can you please stop supporting this lunatic who nearly had me murdered? Is that too much to ask for? And in the Republican Party, by the way, the answer is a resounding yes. That is too much to ask for, because the Republican voters will not turn on Trump. They will turn on Pence, and they will say, how dare you? You should have just been a good boy, a good soldier, and just taken your murder that we were planning for you.
Right. When he drops out after Iowa in 2024, then we'll hear something, I would imagine, from Mike Pence.
Wow.
Well, because until then, he knows that he could come out and do a press conference and play audio of him talking with Trump, and Trump could threaten to have him killed on the audio, and the base would side with Trump. They just would. Yeah. It's like, I don't feel as sorry for Pence because of, as you guys have pointed out, he's absolutely horrible and he has been for decades. But it's the similar sort of position of like, if you were an actress that Harvey Weinstein abused, years before Me Too, sure, you can come forward and try to convince people, but lots of powerful people are going to side with the abuser. It's not that they don't know what's going on, it's that they don't care what's going on, and they'd really prefer that you not bring it up. And so it's horrible for Pence that that's the state of his party, and it's a little bit, again, soulless of him that he seems to be okay enough with that to go along with it if that's what it takes for him to potentially hold some sort of elected office in the future. That he isn't speaking out about it, even though it would torch his career.
And then we test what matters, right? Sometimes we're in the era now where we think nothing matters, and nothing has proven itself to matter. The January 6th Commission is going to be out with public hearings next week. Will anything that they will do that convinces all of us, and we don't need too much convincing, will it convince anybody else, or does nothing matter? We're going to hear horrific things about what was perpetrated against our government, what was attempted to be perpetrated against our government. And we're in the era of nothing matters. And I think Donald Trump is the personification of that.
Yeah, so look, to that point, I'll say the last thing here. It's, of course nothing matters. If Pence turned on Trump, it wouldn't matter to a single Trump voter. And like I said, they would be probably more animated to kill him. And so we all know that. But I'm asking you Republican voters, because you're the core of the problem. Trump wouldn't be around unless you love that type of call to violence, attack against democracy. You guys live for it. So I'm asking you guys, what's wrong with you? Because I think Bernie Sanders is a terrific human being. He's a wonderful politician. He's tried his best. If he threatened to murder AOC, I wouldn't still be on his side. I would think that's the craziest thing I have ever heard.
What's the context?
All of his good work for 40 years, that's funny. All of his good work for 40 years flushed down the toilet because he turned into a lunatic at the end, right? But you guys don't see it that way. You think, man, oh boy, that's a strong man. Doesn't care about the laws, doesn't care about the life of his vice president. Go get him, Donald Trump. You know you think that, because not a single one of you is going to turn based on this evidence.
Yeah, I'm tempted to play like the Louis Gohmert, like, how dare you, Cenk, say that we don't have a heart, that we don't care, they want to kill Mike Pence. Well, you don't. You don't care. How many Republicans, like we've been through, I don't know how many like evolutions of this story, where we find out a little bit more about how crazy it is. I'll remind you that it wasn't that many weeks, maybe a month ago, that we had an insider account of Trump in real time reacting on the 6th to the threats against Pence, and he seemed to be delighting with it. And we know that he responded to some of the people telling him to call off the mob by saying, you don't understand how angry they are. Like he seemed to be on the side of the murderous crowd. But again, none of these developments have led to tons of Republicans coming out and saying that this is obviously beyond some line, some final line for the party, because every one of them is making an ever-evolving calculus of what do they need to say to stay in a position where the base will accept them, because there's always somebody who is willing to be crazier than them who would gladly primary them.
In fact, today, Representative Chris Jacobs dropped out of his race because he said he was in favor of mild gun control after the Buffalo shootings. He's a representative from New York. Every single Republican official unendorsed him, abandoned him, and said, how dare you raise the age that somebody can get an assault weapon from 18 to 21? Outrageous. I'm not joking or exaggerating 1%. And he said, I give up. There's no hope in this Republican Party. I did the mildest gun control possible. I said, yeah, maybe we should do that. And I lost every endorsement. There's no way I can win now. The core of the problem, and mainstream media will never tell you this, the core of the problem is the Republican voters themselves.
Yeah.
And so that is dispiriting, but that is the state of the country. And then people then ask me, and on Twitter they say I hit Republicans too hard. Poor Republicans. Okay, well look, what do you want me to do? And if you're like people I know in my personal life, if you're still a Trump supporter, you're kind of telling me you're a monster. Like you didn't mind him doing 1,000 insane things, and by the way, saying that my family should have been kept out of the country. And you don't mind that at all. There's something weird and terrible and hateful about you. And then on top of that, now you all know that he wanted to have his own vice president killed, and you still don't care? You still support him? No, then don't tell me you're not a monster.
You're a heretic too.
Yeah, because you are a monster.
Yeah, and meanwhile, you point out all those things that should be lines that nobody would cross in support of a politician. Meanwhile, following Biden's gun speech, a commentator on Fox News said that speech was itself an impeachable offense. Like there's no. We're in fantasy land, we're in bizarro world. Anyway, with that said, we have a lot more to get to. We do have to take our first break, but stick around. On the other side, we're gonna talk a little bit more about guns and the blow up that happened at a hearing over them after this.
All right, back on TYT, Cenk, John, Michael, Raymond Footman, and Juniper Pyredust. How's that for an awesome name? Jesus. All right, they just hit the join button below on YouTube. Today's a good day to do. We're giving away $100 gift cards to Blue Apron to 200 members tonight. And if you're not on YouTube, tyt.com/join. All right, John, what's next?
Okay, this is what's next. There are hearings going on in Congress right now over the possibility of passing some sort of gun control, and they've already gotten heated. Take a look at this interaction that Representative Matt Gaetz had.
They think that the answer is fewer guns. And that is what is creating a lot of discomfort among our fellow Americans who cherish their guns and cherish their Second Amendment rights and have actually committed no crimes.
They cherish their children, Mr. Gaetz?
You know what? Their children aren't the ones at risk as a consequence of law-abiding gun owners.
All children in America are at risk.
That's what you get wrong. It's not law-abiding gun owners, David.
Were those children in Uvalde at risk?
Here's the tension.
Yeah, look, Matt Gaetz is obviously objectively wrong. Everyone's children are at risk because guns are everywhere. It doesn't matter if your parent happens to be law-abiding. The law is set up in a way that might benefit them, but it also benefits potential mass shooters. And Matt Gaetz can try to like poo-poo that or act all aggrieved when someone points it out, but it is true. And Matt Gaetz there, like basically all of the Republicans, is there at these hearings to try to stop anything from happening. The status quo that results in mass shootings literally every day in the US is a status quo that they will fight to defend. And we've got more commentary from Matt Gaetz, but I wanted to give you a chance to jump in on that.
Just real quick on this, you know that it's a nonsense argument because just take out guns, put in nukes. Hey, look, it's not, we gave everybody nukes or we allowed everybody to buy nukes. And yeah, a whole bunch of them went off and hundreds of millions of people died, but it wasn't the gun-abiding nuke owners that did it. So, obviously, everybody should have nukes because the gun-abiding ones are perfectly good. End of argument.
Yeah, look, there's not much that you can say about Matt Gaetz that Matt Gaetz doesn't already say. And watching it and hearing him speaks bigger volumes than I could ever say about the fool.
Yeah, it's such a weird choice to use the word cherished in this particular. Like we're in the wake of all of the kid funerals, and you're talking about cherishing your shotgun or your rifle or whatever. Like that's a choice at that point. It's a choice. Okay, I wanna play a little bit more of what he had to say. And in this video, he's gonna get into two different topics. I think both we need to weigh in on. One is an area where he would like to see more guns, and the other is him inadvertently making an absolutely horrible argument against gun control.
I sort of like Congressman Massey's legislation that maybe everyone who's a voter or on their way to vote ought to have the opportunity to carry a firearm to ensure that they're not subject to any intimidation. We're not making school shootings less likely because we're not appropriately tailoring the remedy to the problem. We've got all this ghost guns and gun tracking legislation up today. Were any of these school shootings, were any of these guns ghost guns? And so it seems to be sort of gun control in search of a tragedy to lash onto.
Okay, so the idea that the way to fight back against intimidation of voters is to have more assault weapons at the polls is an interesting theory, but I really love that second bit. Because what he said is, it doesn't make sense to regulate ghost guns because all of these shootings aren't being done by ghost guns. And then mentally, he sort of just trails off from there, but I have to then say, well, so then shouldn't we regulate the sort of guns that are being used in the shooting? They're not ghost guns, that's totally true. Most 18-year-old school shooters don't go out and get ghost guns, but a lot of them do go out and get AR-15s. So by your attempt at logic, shouldn't that be the thing that we're discussing possibly regulating? I have a feeling he's not gonna be in favor of it.
Yeah, there's two different issues here. One is related to intimidation of Democratic voters. We covered this in a different context yesterday. There was a memo that was leaked to Politico where in Michigan, the Republican Party is training people to become poll workers in Democratic areas and then to challenge as many votes as possible to gum up the works and basically cheat. And so now, until recently, the Republican Party could not coordinate with poll workers because they had in the past used them to intimidate Democratic voters. They would literally send in people with guns to Democratic areas to intimidate them. The Supreme Court blocked the Republican Party from doing this all the way to 2020. Then the new conservative Supreme Court's like, intimidate anyone you like, block any votes you like in the Democratic areas. Now Matt Gaetz in Congress, in the midst of a gun control hearing, says, hey, maybe we should bring our guns to the polling stations, maybe in Democratic areas. So that's a brown shirt move. That is how fascists intimidate the opposition. Maybe there could be significant consequences for you if you vote, etc. So is he in search of a problem that he talked about later? Is there a problem of Democrats bringing guns to Republican areas and threatening them? No, even the Republicans haven't made up a charge like that. It's literally never happened, okay? So he's saying, I'll bring the guns so that we don't get intimidated, okay? And so, but now back to the main issue of guns. So there's no question that we have the least gun control on the planet. That's a fact. There's no question that we have the most guns per capita on the planet. That's a fact, and it's not even close. And there's no question that we have the most massacres, mass shootings, and gun deaths on the planet. Not close, right? So is it the guns? Yes, it is definitively the guns. Everything else is an excuse, okay? Oh, well, and Matt, that same Matt Gaetz said, oh, no, you could use AR-15s for different things, like sports shooting. Oh, are you having fun while our kids are being murdered? And self-defense, really? You're gonna shoot an AR-15 inside your own house and maybe hit your own kids? Because it's, okay, there's no way Matt Gaetz knows how to control that gun or where the hell he's shooting if in a situation like that. And then finally, just to rub it in, like, haha, I'm kidding, I actually enjoy these massacres. He said also for hog shooting. Like, in other words, we're messing with you. We don't care about the massacres of your children at all.
And by the way, these AR-15s leave these children, not to be graphic, unrecognizable. They're shot so badly that you needed DNA to identify these kids in Uvalde. So this is beyond just, oh, a feral pig's gonna come into my yard. These are killing kids to the point of not being able to be recognized, not knowing who they were. It's the most tragic and disgusting thing, and we're just allowing it to go on. And to Matt Gaetz, ghost guns are used in shootings all the time. They've been killing kids this year, all year long. They are a big part of teen suicide, which may not be a massacre, Congressman Gaetz, but they are part of what is going on with guns and easy access to them. And so it all does matter.
Yeah. Well, we seem to all agree that they don't seem to care enough about stopping this violence, and that sort of criticism has been coming at the Republicans, since Uvalde, since before Uvalde. We've had many mass shootings even since then. It's constant, and they appear to be starting to feel the pressure from that. Take a look at Representative Louis Gohmert responding to these criticisms.
You think we don't have hearts? It's just that when we look at the things that you're doing and you're trying to do to America, we've seen the carnage. I mean, for heaven's sake, let's take example. Democrats control the major cities that have the worst murder rates. That's right. Your ideas have been shown to get people killed.
So that's not even literally true. That's not actually how it works out at the city level. But even if it was, you would then still have to explain what is it that you think Louis Gohmert, those Democratic mayors or city councils are doing that's leading to the deaths. Now in these Democratic cities, he would say they have gun control. Okay, well then make a logical argument as to why that results in more gun-based murder. We will actually explain why making it so that 18-year-olds can buy ARs does lead to more 18-year-olds using ARs to kill people. So we have demonstrated that linkage. He is to the limited capacity that he has mentally to form a counter argument. He's doing his best, but clearly they get that the country is turning against them and sees who is standing in the path, in the way of some sort of reform, and who is trying to stop these shootings from actually happening again.
So a Democratic politician in Philadelphia said, actually, we're trying to pass gun control, but the Republicans in the state legislature won't let us. So it's literally your fault. But beyond that, he says, do you think we're heartless? My resounding answer is yes, definitely. I don't think you care about those dead kids at all, not 1%. Don't come crying to me about Republicans' feelings. Okay, I care a lot more about those dead kids in Uvalde, Texas, and by the way, in Sandy Hook and everywhere else. I care about all the dead people because of Republicans. I don't care about your goddamn crying, okay? Republicans don't want any gun control. Lack of gun control is definitely leading to the mass shootings. Every person who has ever studied it, every fact points to that. It's super obvious. We have the same video games, the same mental health problems as Japan does, Northern Europe does, everywhere else in the world does, Sub-Saharan Africa does. But they don't have massacres like we do. Yes, nowhere else in the world are there massacres like this. And yes, it's definitely because of the Republicans. And yes, people like Uygur are 100% heartless and don't mind your kids dying at all, as long as they get to brag to their vicious Republican voters. Don't worry, I didn't let them take your hobby away. They're sick. That's you, Louis Gohmert. You're a sick, sick man. Stop butchering our kids. Am I clear enough? All right, let's go to Swalwell, because Swalwell was actually, for the first time, honestly, in my life, a Democrat in politics actually stood up for us. Let's go to his clip.
19 children are dead. And so to my Republican colleagues, I ask, who are you here for? Are you here for our kids? Or are you here for the killers? And Mr. Jordan, to say we are trying to dramatically change the country, if trying to make sure that no more kids are put in the ground with a Superman coffin means dramatically change the country, guilty. That's why we're here.
You should watch the whole 5-minute speech that Swalwell did. It was fantastic. And I'm not playing around. I haven't seen any like a person in the squad or Bernie or anyone give as tough a speech as Swalwell did. And all the Republicans caught feelings over it. I can't believe he's telling the truth. Democrats aren't supposed to fight back. They were furious that for the first time in our lifetimes, a Democrat had actually fought back against Republicans. Yes, stop trying to hit him, and God damn it, hit him already. So thank you, Eric Swalwell. Thank you, we appreciate it. Yeah. By the way, just super random note, Swalwell has endorsed Michael Shure.
Yeah.
So God bless.
My biggest congressional endorsement. It means the world to me because my campaign is being based a lot on gun control. I'm pushing back on the rights that they're trying to mess with on the other side. Not just the rights that they're trying to take back, but the rights that they're trying to protect that are killing our kids. So I couldn't be more proud of having that endorsement.
Yeah, that's awesome. And the only thing I'll add to in terms of who they're there for, like, so we know that they're standing in the way of gun control, but let's also remember how they treat people who either have done or threatened to do gun violence. Like George Zimmerman became a little celebrity on their side. Kyle Rittenhouse is still making appearances. I saw that he was speaking at Real America's Voice, had live coverage of him at the Republican Young Women's Leadership Conference. Kyle Rittenhouse, they only know who he is because he killed people with a gun and they love him. What about those wackos that stood outside of their house and pointed assault weapons at peaceful protesters? They love people who commit acts of gun violence and
they want those people to run for office in Missouri, right? And they did.
They did. I don't think they did particularly well.
But they got invited to the Republican National.
They did, exactly. They were at the RNC.
Yeah, they got invited to the convention. The Bundys are heroes. I mean, you kill somebody with a gun and you're gonna be a Republican hero. You're gonna make money for the rest of your life on vicious right-wingers going, oh, you killed somebody. Oh, you went to a Black Lives Matter protest to kill someone? Atta boy, here's money, here, take my, I'll pay you next time. You remember, if you kill someone I don't agree with, I'll pay you next time. Yeah. That's what the right-wing voters think. So they're vicious. Thank you, Eric Swalwell, for being the first person to fight back courageously. We'll put the link down below to his entire speech because his speech was vicious towards Republicans. And I say, goddamn time, about time that someone who's an actual Democratic congressperson said, yes, those are the bad guys, and said it very clearly.
I'll interrupt to say Chris Murphy, the senator from Connecticut, has also said it on the other side, on the Senate side, in many ways, and has been a great voice on this issue for a long time. Obviously, he's a senator from Connecticut, where they had, the thing that we thought could never happen again until a couple of weeks ago.
And just to make sure that you're ready for what's going to happen next week, I mean, it was already, these hearings were super emotional, people were yelling at each other. Well, we found out earlier today that next week, survivors and parents of the shootings in Uvalde and Buffalo will be testifying at the hearings. So you can only imagine what it's going to be like, including, by the way, they're going to have testimony from Mia Cirillo, a 4th grade student at Robb Elementary. A lot of people know her story. She was the student who had to cover herself in her friend's blood and play dead to not be killed herself. She will be giving testimony at the hearing. So I hope that the Democrats are just as fired up when it comes to next week. Okay, with that said, we want to get into one more topic, or want to take our second break early?
All right, no, let's do the next one, I guess.
Okay, let's jump into this then. Even more text messages have been released that would have been flying back and forth on the Republican side on January 6th. And there really was an attempt by many of these people who since then have implied that everything that was happening was totally fine. In fact, it was patriotic. At the time, they really did want to stop it. So you have Tom Price, who was former President Trump's Secretary of Health and Human Services, apparently texting Mark Meadows. POTUS should go on air and diffuse this. Extremely important. Glad that he emphasized that. Representative Jeff Duncan also messaging Meadows. Now we know said POTUS needs to calm this S down. Representative Chip Roy says fix this now. And of course, you can't fix a problem unless you have some influence over it. They're all admitting that clearly this is a guy who will have control over these people, which is not what you would think if you were actually convinced that they were all Antifa. They're not going to listen to the president if they're left-wing provocateurs. Anyway, Mick Mulvaney said, Mark, he needs to stop this now. Can I do anything to help? I don't know, maybe along the way at some point during that first term you could have done something to help, but instead we ended up at January 6th. And Reince Priebus in all caps tweeted or texted, tell them to go home. Even Don Jr. texted, he's got to condemn this S. Now, some of the others might have been able to get through. That was just Don Jr. Trump's not gonna listen to him. But everybody was trying to get through on that day.
All right, so this is beyond the text because CNN has a couple of new things here. First of all, they interviewed more than a dozen of the texters themselves. And they said every one of them, that doesn't mean every one of the texters. It means every one of the ones that they reached. So I don't imagine they got to Don Jr., but I don't know. But potentially guys like Mick Mulvaney and Reince Priebus, two former chiefs of staff to Donald Trump, more than a dozen of them confirmed, yeah, those are my texts and I meant it.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is top officials in the Trump administration saying, yeah, we knew Trump's basically a maniac. And on top of that, this is really important, we knew he could stop it. And we knew he was choosing not to stop it. And he waited for hours and hours and hours. And in fact, if you remember when Kevin McCarthy called him, also reported by another Republican, this is 100% confirmed, Trump apparently told McCarthy, hey, those protesters apparently care more about my administration, care more about the country than you do, Kevin. In other words, I'm happy that they broke into the house and that you're afraid for your life. Yeah. And earlier today, we carried the story of Vice President Pence's chief of staff asking the Secret Service on January 5th, the day before, we think the president might put us in physical danger. Can you protect us from the president? So they all know what a monster Donald Trump is. The problem is, as always, the Republican voters don't like him despite that. They like him because of that.
Yeah.
And so whenever this goes to the voters, they go, what part of vicious, lying, pathological, narcissist, hateful, and violent leader did you misunderstand? We voted for it many times. We're still backing him 100%. So every vicious thing that you see that Trump did and that the Republicans knew, the Republican voters are perfectly okay with.
Yeah, and the other part of it is, again, going back to what they're going to do next week at these hearings on the January 6th when they have open hearings, is this stuff. This stuff's going to be there, right? All of it's going to be there. All these texts that were sent to Mark Meadows. And it mattered to those people when they didn't know it was going to be public. So it has to try and matter to some of these people when it is public, who can stand up and see a former president and what he didn't do that day. If you thought he should have done it, then admit that it should have happened, and admit what was going on. Like Johnny said, if it was Antifa, right, they wouldn't have gone to this president to stop it. They knew it wasn't. And that's what has to come. These hearings have to matter. And this stuff is what needs to make them matter more than any of it.
Yeah, and I don't know if the people who CNN reached out to, who Cenk referenced, I don't know if they're going to be speaking at or whatever, but they've been willing to go on the record. Alyssa Farah Griffin, the former Trump director of strategic communications, said, "I thought the president could stop it and was the only person who could stop it," saying that they would have listened to him on the inside. And Mick Mulvaney said, "I wish someone had responded to my outreach." And we have to be super clear. The delay in him coming out and saying it didn't just produce a couple more hours of, hey, it's chaotic, there's people, and a lectern got moved. People died. Lots of cops, 114 cops were injured, 7 people lost their lives. Some cops committed suicide in the wake of it. Perhaps if it hadn't gone on for hours, some of them might not have. I don't know that they're that focused on the woman who was shot anymore on the right. At one point, they had been raising her up as kind of like a martyr to the MAGA movement or whatever. But if he had immediately told them all to leave, would she have died? Would she have been shot? She thought she was working for him. The 850 people who've been charged with crimes, who are going to spend time in prison, might lose their jobs. Those are all devoted MAGA people. Would those horrible things have happened to them? The derailing of their life, if Trump had just been clear from the very beginning that they shouldn't be there? He screwed over all of those people. People died because he didn't act. People who love him and trust him died because he refused to say anything.
And by the way, he was hoping that they would be even more scared for their lives, so they would go back in and redo the election basically and not certify it. That's why he waited all that time. And so one of the rioters was overheard once he finally put out the tweet saying, "You guys are amazing, you're the best people I've ever met. Thank you for causing this violence and breaking into the Capitol, etc. But okay, I guess you should go home." And one of the rioters was overheard after the tweet going, "Oh, he's telling us to go home, let's go." So of course they were waiting. Yeah. Who did they do it for? Like Elmer Fudd? No, they did it for Donald Trump, obviously, right? And they're in there, they're chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." Mike Pence nearly gets killed. No word, no word, no word, because you know what a monster he is. And again, last thing, all those guys who were not just worried about the safety and well-being of certainly of the Democrats, but of their own Republican colleagues, that was part of their concern. But their bigger concern, if we're being honest about these generally scummy politicians, is that they were worried he was going to hurt the Republican Party.
Yeah.
But you know what? Unfortunately, they were wrong. Trump was right. It didn't hurt the Republicans at all. If the election were held today, Trump would beat Biden. The Republican base loved the violence. They haven't backed off of Trump at all, not 1%. They would all vote for him instantly today. And since the Democrats are so weak right now in the polls, Biden's losing badly. And so that monster could be back in office, and he ain't ever leaving if he gets back in office.
Okay, well, with that, we're going to take
maybe it mattered, to Georgia Republicans, right? I mean, that was the first inkling what just happened in Georgia in the elections, where Raffensperger, the Secretary of State, won re-election as in the face of Trump's criticism, and Brian Kemp, whatever we may think of him, the fact that we're rooting for Kemp now is unbelievable. But the fact that he won re-election against a Trump endorsed, that could be a breath of hope. You know?
Yeah, don't. No,
a breath is not. You need a lot of breath.
Yeah, and Raffensperger maybe because that was so obvious and there wasn't a huge Democratic opponent there. But Kemp, they mainly seem to have voted for him because they were worried that Purdue was going to lose to Stacey Abrams. So the Republican voters kind of made a political calculation there, which I'm surprised by. Usually they just slavishly follow whatever the Mad King says. But yes, there they didn't. So it's worthy of note. One down, yeah. 49 states left to go, maybe. All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, good news, somebody actually being held a little bit responsible for what happened on January 6th. We'll be right back. All right, back on TYT, Cenk, Michael, and John with you guys. John, take it away.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot to mention our other participants. Sorry, brother. Anara Valen, Robert Schaefer, and Sarah Joy. They just joined up. Now you're doing the show with us. We love it. Thank you for being paying members. It's a good day to do it. Food for Thought trivia coming up. We're giving away 200 gift cards. They're $100 a gift card for Blue Apron. You guys are gonna love that. All right, and tyt.com/join to become one of them, or hit the join button below on YouTube. Sorry, John, go ahead.
I don't remember what I was gonna say now.
Okay, now I ruined it.
I loaded it up into memory and that's gone. Anyway,
Something about Blue Apron.
200 people. Okay. Former Trump White House advisor Peter Navarro had been avoiding the subpoena that he was facing to speak to the January 6th commission. He apparently thought he didn't need to comply with it because this is DC, he's powerful, well connected, there are never any consequences, and that is generally true. In this case though, he got arrested actually. And here he is speaking out about what happened to him.
Instead of coming to my door where I live, which by the way is right next to the FBI, instead of calling me and say, hey, we need you down at court, we've got a warrant for you, I would have gladly come. What did they do? They intercepted me getting on the plane. And then they put me in handcuffs, they bring me here, they put me in leg irons, they stick me in a cell. By the way, just historical note, I was in John Hinckley's cell. They seem to think that that was like an important historical note. Okay, that's punitive. That what they did to me today violated the Constitution.
Yeah, it was really weird of the FBI to bring that up. And then a little bit weird for him to bring that. Why did he bring it up in that? Anyway, so that was Peter Navarro, and he was hauled away because, as he points out, the FBI was really rude. He would have gladly complied with the subpoena if, wait, he actually just wasn't complying with it. He knew that he had to go in. He refused to, so they went and got him. That's how this is supposed to work. It generally doesn't in DC, but this is how it's supposed to work. He knew he was supposed to go in. He chatted with Ari Melber this week about the fact that he was defying the subpoena. So you can't be that shocked that they finally went and got you.
No, that was an amazing piece of video. I love that. I thought it was just hilarious. Let me translate for you.
But also, Cenk, it looks like he's taking whatever Don Jr.'s been taking recently.
Yeah, I mean,
He's energetic.
Yeah,
energetic. That's a good word.
They're all taking some sort of crazy juice, right? So the translation of that video is, I'm one of the elites.
Yeah.
I'm above the law. How dare they enforce the law against me? Well, it turns out, Peter, you ain't above the law. And by the way, don't get me wrong, I'm as shocked as you are, okay? I thought DOJ would never do this. And so, I mean, remember, this is not on the substance, this is just on the contempt. Because he refuses to testify in front of the Senate, in front of the House, and that's against the law. You can't ignore a subpoena. You couldn't do it, and it turns out, hey, Peter Navarro can't do it. And so now, I think the more important charges are about him participating in basically an insurrection and a coup through what he wrote a book about, the Green Bay Sweep. And I mean, Ari Melber made a good point. He's like, you know that you say you don't want to speak to Congress. You know that they can hear you on TV, right? And he didn't say this, but the soldier, Peter, you wrote a whole book about how you plan to steal the election. So it's not like you're like, oh, I have a moral problem with speaking out on this. I have a principled issue here. No, his principle that he's livid about is, I thought I was an elite. How dare you enforce the law against one of the elites in Washington?
Yeah, I don't think he wants to have to testify in an area where the lies he's inclined to tell could then have consequences. He wants to have control over it. He wants to be able to grift off of it, sell his book, but he doesn't want to have to be sworn in or anything like that.
Right, well, and that goes to a bigger subject here, which is the Republican Party and their disregard for the law and what they're doing to it over and over, and how they've been doing it in disregarding congressional subpoenas, in calls to cooperate with Congress, calls to provide information to Congress, calls to provide tax return information as a candidate, all things that are legally required.
Stock Act.
Well, I mean, again, that's what I'm saying. This is the nothing else matters part. And they weave this in as if that is some kind of a joke, some arcane old America. They want make America great again. That's what we had when America was great before he took office. So honestly, this is the scariest part of all of it. And he is part of that web that they're weaving. Peter Navarro has been there for a lot of it. And he was there spewing the lies and the misinformation from that White House. And we're seeing it happen now, where he is indignant about being arrested for breaking the law.
Yeah, and look, more good news regarding Navarro. So on the actual substantive charges of him, basically planning an insurrection, the grand jury is sitting on that issue now. It's been impaneled, and they might arrest him on the substance.
Yeah.
So that hasn't happened yet. And it's not clear if he's the target or a witness, but if he's not the target, then Trump might be the target. And so I'm shocked to see the DOJ acting, absolutely floored by it. I thought there was almost no chance that Merrick Garland would take any action. On contempt, I thought there was a good chance they would do something, and that's what this is. But the fact that they've impaneled a grand jury to look into the substance of the January 6th when it comes to not to the what they would consider the riffraff, the masses. Yes, of course, they'll beat the living crap out of them, right? The ones that actually broke in. But the elites, Navarro, Trump, etc. Wow. Yeah. Okay, so if that grand jury comes in, that could make a giant difference.
No question. It could also get ramped up after the open hearings of the January 6th commission. If, Garland has said we're letting Congress do their work a lot. And if Congress does their work and what Garland sees is we have to do our work, then I would imagine, again, I'm with you on Garland generally, but I would imagine that's what he's waiting for to a degree.
Yeah, I hope he doesn't wait too long because there is a ticking clock on
I was going to say, he can't wait very long, which is why it's good that it's next week that these open hearings happen.
One last piece of good news. I know that, look, arresting Trump on this through the grand jury, etc., seems like a really long shot. There's no reason why it should be. He definitely did it. They have overwhelming evidence, but Democrats are usually very, very scared to act, right? But if they do arrest him, he almost, I looked up the legal definition of insurrection. He certainly did it. And if you get convicted of insurrection, that is one of the punishments for that is that you are not allowed to run for office again. So for God's sake, take action.
Yeah. We have to go to this last video though, because there are those in the Republican Party who are good at hiding what they think about how the system should work and what you should be able to get away with. Louis Gohmert just isn't it. He doesn't have the gray matter for it. And so he just blurts out what he's really thinking. Take a look at this.
It actually puts an exclamation point on the fact that we have a two-tier justice system. If you're a Republican, you can't even lie to Congress or lie to an FBI agent, or they're coming after you. They're going to bury you. They're going to put you in the DC jail and terrorize and torture you and not live up to the Constitution there. However, this comes on the heels of Sussman being acquitted because the jury that had a bunch of Hillary Clinton lovers in it, donors even, they said, look, he's a Democrat, and of course they're going to lie. Everybody lies.
Well, how about that jury foreperson? No big deal to lie to the FBI, huh?
Exactly.
That was amazing.
And I know we're going to focus on the first part, but he's saying at the end that the guy he's talking about should have been arrested for lying. But he doesn't think that Navarro should have been? Like, shouldn't you have one standard? I know I sound
What have we come to?
Yeah.
What have we come to?
No, that was, of course, hilarious, right? I mean, it's leave it to Gohmert to be like, now we can't even lie to the FBI anymore. I mean, that's what we've been doing our whole lives. We can't lie to Congress, then what the hell are we gonna do? Right. Okay, what did I come to Congress for anyway? Okay, if I can't lie to you, well, shoot, I might as well go home. Okay, I mean, look, that's why Louis Gohmert's roundly thought of as the dumbest man in Congress. Although Paul Gosar and a couple of, and now Marjorie Taylor Greene and et cetera, are giving him a run for his money. But Gohmert is the guy who said that Barack Obama was reconstituting the Ottoman Empire. Now, I know, to the best of my knowledge, no reporter has ever asked him. It appears to be entirely unreconstituted. So did you maybe get that one a little, were you a little bit off on that one, right? But no, he just goes around but again, in Republican circles, they're like, yeah, that makes sense. God damn it, we can't lie to Congress, the FBI. What is the world coming to? And guys, now in seriousness, It's because it's part of a mentality of, we run this country. We can do whatever we want. And now there's a new rules where we have to share power
Right.
equally in a democracy. They don't like that at all.
Nope.
And that same thing for Navarro. He's like, I thought we were above the law. What the hell's going on here? Are we gonna have to actually abide by the law like non-Christian white men? This is gross. And he's like genuinely outraged.
And that's how people were after Clinton won and beat Bush. They couldn't believe these people are not entitled to run. You know, we're going to have to investigate every single thing he's ever done because they're not like us and they're not going to be part of what we're doing. Forgetting, you know, the extracurriculars of Clinton. The point was that this is our game. Nobody else can play this game, and that's exactly what you're seeing from Gomer. It's exactly what you saw from Navarro there, and that's what I've been talking about throughout the show as a thread is this idea that nothing matters, right? And these people don't think anything matters unless the other side does it, and it only matters because of what it does to them.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, so we're out of time, but sureforcongress.com, okay?
Tuesday's the election.
Tuesday's the election.
Go online, check it out. There's a store, there's everything.
That's right, and certainly if you live in the 37th district of California, make sure you're voting, okay? Vote your conscience.
There's a lot of good candidates in the race.
There are. I'll even admit that there are a lot of good candidates.
Such a Michael thing to say.
But there's one who's better, I promise.
And that you could be sure of. Okay. All right, guys. We have another congressional candidate coming up next, and we have some really fun stories too. And now all of a sudden, the entire world hates Sweden. I'm serious, and you'll see why, and you'll hate them. All that when we come back. Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.